Dear students, good evening. Welcome to Law Excellence IAS. Let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 30th May 2020. Before going into the class, let me make a small announcement. Prelim cum Mains 2021 batches started, and these batches will be available online live for a while, and the same batches will be continued as offline once the lockdown is lifted. So Law Excellence also have started Sri Gayatri Residential Campus in Hyderabad to provide for safe, secure, hygiene environment for the students to continue their classes. You can enroll for this calling it 9052193939. In the personality of the day, let us talk about Tukaram Munde. Why we are talking about this Maharashtrian official? So this man who got the 20th rank and got into Maharashtra cadre, he was transferred 13 times in his 12 years of career. So transfer is used as an important tool to punish honest officials. In the hands of the political leaders of the day, the transfer is an important weapon. So if integrity of the public office and officials have to increase, these transfers have to be removed from the hands of the ministers. In this context, the Second Administrative Reforms Commission made an important recommendation. One is to take care of these transfers and postings related matters. An independent body has to exist like Civil Services Board, and any officer who is posted in a particular position shall not be unduly transferred. In this case, a fixed tenure has to be there at least for a minimum of 2 years. These are the recommendations given by Second ARC. We can use this information with regard to governance, this as an example in ethics. Coming to the articles of the day, we start with Daily Editorial Enrichment Programme and then Targeted News Analysis. And you are also been given a test, and this test can be accessed at elearn.laix.in. See carefully, elearn.laix.in. The notes related to today's class and the PPT, and also a test 10 questions test is available free for all of you at elearn.laix.in. You can access it from there. The first article for discussion today is Anchoring Ties with Canberra, the Virtual Way. So in this article, the author is highlighting the changing context of India-Australia relations and also emphasizes on upcoming bilateral virtual summit between these two countries. Let us see the highlights of this article. You know that high-level summits are happening between India and Australia, and also high-level visits have become a norm. You know, Prime Ministers of Australia, Julia Gillard, Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, all these have visited India. In the last January, Mr. Morrison, the present Prime Minister, also made a visit. In this case, Mr. Modi also has returned the visit to Australia and electrified the entire country with his enthusiastic presence. So, now we have to convert this particular high-level understanding that is existing between these two countries into economic and defense cooperation. So, presently, the mutual logistics support agreement on the front of the defense is on the cards. It provides an enhanced defense cooperation and also an ease to conduct the large-scale joint military exercises. And the second is the developments are going forward to include Australia with regard to Malabar exercises. So already AUSINDEX are the bilateral naval exercises conducted between Australia and India. Now Australia will join as a third party with regard to Malabar exercises. And then 2+2 talks are going on between India and Australia at secretary level. That is, Defense and External Affairs Secretaries meet from time to time to discuss various pending issues. Now it is upgraded to include the ministers. The 2+2 dialogue is going to become a ministerial dialogue. And further, So, COVID-19 crisis, how Australia has handled is an example for the world. So, in this context, what happened? Australian Prime Minister Morrison is able to take all the states along with him. It means how he played with federalism, cooperative federalism, to ensure a strong fight against COVID 19 can be an example to the world. And next, the Australia has the few number of cases compared to many other countries, and this controlled adaptation which has balanced the number of infections and also did not hurt the economy. So the one way the economy was safeguarded, and the other way the infection rate also was controlled. So this is going to be an example for the world. So in this context, Indian scientists also played an important role that we need to remember. So these names are Shitji Kapoor and S.S. Vasan. These two Indian born scientists' efforts are phenomenal. And the next is the global supply chains are going to be permanently changed. In this context, a new kind of collaboration is expected between these countries. So, direct to consumer, consumer packaged goods, these are the things which are being proposed and developed by Anthony Pratt of Pratt Industries. So, India also can learn from them. And next, Australian universities have pioneered the online classes and how to provide for blended learning and online education. This is Australian universities niche area which India can learn. So in this context, what is the essence of the article? The India Australia virtual summit, which is going to be held next week, is going to be of its kind, and it can navigate through the turbulent geopolitical situations that are upcoming in this particular region. So there is one issue which I want to specifically talk in this article, that is related to Quad. So this was proposed by the President George Bush of United States of America. So the democracies across the world shall be put together against the resurgent China. What are these democracies? India, USA, Australia, Japan. So these four are together are called as Quad. So the increasing India-Australia cooperation was always suspicious for China. In this context, India and Australia are able to steer clear of this particular suspicion to engage positively. That is the point we need to remember. The next article for discussion, that is awful silence. This is in the context of ongoing tensions and skirmishes at line of actual control between India and China. Here we will explore what can be the real intentions of China to heighten the tensions over here, and also why shall we not allow United States of America to intervene over here or to mediate here. In this scenario, understand one thing. In spite of escalation of the tensions at line of actual controls and increased patrols from China and increased number of soldiers on both the sides, still the situation is not out of control. In this context, what can be the intention of the China? We can talk about three possible scenarios. So what are these three possible scenarios? One, in the COVID-19, the China has got much a bad reputation. So if you see Australia, United States of America, UK, many other European countries, they're all pointing fingers to China. So it is the Chinese delayed response and not sharing of information as blown up this particular crisis. So China wants to deviate the attention of the world away from this particular COVID-19 that can be an issue. So to deviate from the COVID-19 crisis, that can be the objective of China. And the second is, and India is stated to be a growing economic powerhouse of the world. And many of the countries, if they are expecting to move away from China, the alternative destination for them will be India. So China wants to show to India that it can never be an alternative. So India's energy shall be kept somewhere else so that it cannot focus on this particular thing. So any business, if it has to move, obviously stability, peace is required. And if these tensions heighten, probably the movement of the business may not happen. Probably the second intention of the China may be to obstruct the business. And the third thing here is India has some geographical vulnerabilities. So, in this context, India is trying to have a maritime relationship in the Indo Pacific with the USA, Australia, Japan. So, these geographical vulnerabilities China is trying to expose so that it wants to confine India to this particular region itself. And finally, there is the infrastructure enhancement or augmentation is going on across the border. So this infrastructure augmentation has to be stopped. So these can be the different reasons for China to escalate these particular tensions. Now, what India has to do? India has to proceed with negotiations. You know, in 2003, when Prime Minister Vajpayee visited China, we made one agreement. This is called Declaration on Principles of Relations between Declaration of Principles for Relations and Comprehensive Cooperation between China and India. So, according to this, special representatives were appointed for border negotiation and settlement. So, this can be a mechanism that can be taken forward. Recently, China is not showing interest in this. And second, when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited China, border defense cooperation agreement was made. I think it is the time we need to revise this border defense cooperation agreement. And added to that, India also has to provide a public clarification on the situation and also has to build consensus over its plans to assert its position across LAC. So let the people know what is happening over there. So these steps India has to take now. The next article for discussion, that is Belated but Welcome. So this article emphasizes on the responsibility of the courts in protecting the human rights. It is written in the context of the recent plight of migrant workers. Now let us see the highlights of this particular article. So understand that whenever the human rights are in danger, the responsibility to protect them lies in the hands of judiciary. So we need to see the functions of the judiciary as follows. The first, dispute resolution, you know this. And the next is upholding the constitution. So in upholding the constitution, the judicial review is an important function, and protection of the rights of the citizens, this is another most important function. So whenever the rights are in danger, it is the courts that have to stand between the government and the rights of the citizen. So these rights of the citizens that make the Indian constitution the most liberal constitution in the world. So initially, in the case of the migrant workers issue, the Supreme Court was not sensitive enough. It means that it has stood with the arguments of the executive and stated that what the governments can do when they don't want to listen to the governments. But now it has took a sensitive view to them and stated that it is the responsibility of union and the state governments to make these people to reach to their homes safely. That is what Supreme Court has stated. So in this context, there is one instance where judiciary has failed to stand to the protection of the rights of the citizens, where judiciary also has revised its judgment later, that is related to ADM versus Shakti Kant Das case, ADM Jabalpur versus Shakti Kant Das case. And you need to remember this particular case, which is a famous case during emergency. Here, habeas corpus is a mandam, so habeas corpus is a writ which is available under Article 32 of the Constitution. Now, when the emergency was imposed, the judiciary did not provide this particular writ to the citizens. So the habeas corpus is being taken away from the citizens. The majority of the bench are of the opinion that no person can approach the court with writ of habeas corpus during the emergency. In such a way, the fundamental rights of the citizens and their enforcement was put to test with this judgment. So, the present situation of humanitarian crisis of migrant workers and the failure of the court to protect the same is compared to this particular colossal failure of the judiciary in India. The next article for discussion it is Nascent Arabian Sea Cyclone may delay monsoon arrival. So this article is about how the monsoons are formed, how the cyclone in Arabian Sea can affect the southwest monsoons. That is what we need to learn. First, you need to understand how a monsoon is formed. So now in our north, it is summer. When we go to Australia, it is winter. So there is a high pressure zone in Australia and a low pressure zone is formed on Tibet and Central Asian lands. So obviously from high pressure to low pressure the moisture moves. So that brings in rain to India as southwest monsoons. You know this particular thing from your geography. Now how the cyclone affects this? You know cyclone is a low pressure depression. So when a low pressure is created somewhere here in the Arabian Sea on the path of these monsoons, rather than these monsoons going on to this low pressure area, this will be sucked into this cyclone. So in that way, it deviates the journey of this particular monsoons. That's why any cyclone formed in the Arabian Sea during southwest monsoon time is going to affect the Indian monsoon. That is the point we need to remember. The next article for discussion, it states that the fiscal deficit at 4.6% for financial 2020 as revenue sags. So the normal estimated fiscal deficit, it was 3.8%. Now it is raised 4.6%. You know the reasons. The reasons are obvious. The incomes of the government has come down due to COVID-19 and related lockdown. And added to that, the expenditure of the governments did not proportionately come down. So in this context, we need to remember certain terminologies related to economy. What are they? What is revenue deficit? So revenue deficit means total revenue receipts and revenue expenditure, the difference between these two, it is called revenue deficit. And revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure, this is the total expenditure, minus total receipts, that is revenue receipts minus plus capital receipts. From these total receipts, if you are removing borrowings, what we get is the fiscal deficit. And then what is primary deficit? Primary deficit means the revenue from the fiscal deficit. If you are removing the effect of interest payments done by the government, then what we get is the primary deficits. So remember revenue deficit and the budgetary deficit. And budgetary deficit and fiscal deficit. The budgetary deficit and fiscal deficit, what is the difference? The difference is borrowings. Between fiscal deficit and primary deficit, what is the difference? That is the interest payments. These are the points you need to remember. The next article for discussion is the core sector output contracts 38% in April. So the core sectors, they form 40%, close to the weightage of 40% in index of industrial production, which is IIP. So in this context, any contraction of these core sectors, they reflect the poor performance of Indian economy. So let us try to understand what are these core sectors. You can get a prelims question over here on what constitute the core sectors and what is their weightage in IIP, and which has got the highest weightage in the core sectors. That can be a question. Here remember refinery products, electricity, and then steel, coal. So I normally consider rest. So refinery products, electricity, steel, and then others. So that's what you remember as. So the question can ask you, so arrange the following in the order of their relative weightage in the index of industrial production. So if you see refinery has 28%, electricity 19.85%, and then steel it has 17%, after that coal which comes to 10.33%. That's how you can remember it as. The next article is the Chinese media slams U.S. President over border comments. You know that the tensions are very high on the COVID 19 and related issues between USA and China. In this context, as border skirmishes increase across LAC, the President Trump he tried to mediate. He offered for mediation between India and China. Both the countries categorically denied that they do not want any such mediation. So, in this context, both the countries wanted to send an unanimous message that the third party intervention can complicate their relationships rather than paving a way forward. And especially with a president like Trump, it is better unwarranted. In this context, the China and Chinese official media it is trying to say that India and China, if their collective strength comes together, then the world cannot stand to them. So anyhow, keeping that good words aside, any intervention of a third party will internationalize the issue, which is not good for both the countries. And United States of America has a very bad history to gain out of this particular interventions to its own advantage. Let us see the questions of the day. These are the practice questions which are been asked previously. Consider the following list. Which of the above are the industries that are part of core sector? So you remember and recollect the picture which I showed to you. So in this case, the textiles and pharmaceuticals are not part of it. Then answer can be 1, 2, 5. Next question is, which of the following statements are possibly correct about the recent boundary dispute between India and China? So, I will leave this question for you to answer, and please post your answers in the comment box below. And finally, thank you very much and have a great day. Before leaving, I want to request all of you to take this test at elearn.laix.in. So please take the test at this particular website, and don't think that if you get the less marks you are not good at that. No, what we have to do is we have to learn through these particular tests, and exam is all about getting that intuition in the hall. So how can you get that intuition? By repeated practice. Once again, thank you very much. Have a great day.